My name is Ernest Francis Jones, and I am a graduate student at the Kansas State University. This is my podcast of semiotic theory and application. According to Daniel Chandler, semiotics is not a standardized academic discipline. According to Baldwin and others, some descriptive theories are more accurately called models, whereby a model is a representation of a process or complex pattern of phenomena. I am led to believe semiotics is a descriptive theory or a model. Perhaps semiotics can be more precisely described as a science, encompassing abounding and differing theoretical standpoints and related methodologies. What is semiotics and how can it be defined? A rudimentary definition of semiotics can be described as the study of signs. This definition is provided by Umberto Eco, a former Italian university professor, a semiotician, and a best-selling author. In his opinion, a sign is implicitly a communicative device taking place between two human beings intentionally aiming to express or communicate something. While the examples of early philosophers and religious figures are too numerous to mention in this short presentation, I will nonetheless seek to highlight a few of the more prominent individuals. In the text De Dialectica, St. Augustine defines a sign as anything which shows itself first to the sense and then indicates something beyond itself to the mind. In the second book of De Doctrina Christiana, St. Augustine wrote, "A sign is something that beyond the impression it makes on sense, makes something else enter cognition." Despite not being complete or homogeneous, the concept of signs as presented by St. Augustine are considered essential to the development of semiotics. Anselm of Canterbury is credited with advancing the preliminary work of St. Augustine by clarifying spoken and mental words are identical. While the contributions of Anselm of Canterbury might be perceived as seemingly insignificant, the distinctions between mental and natural or spoken words contributed notably to forming subsequent theories of signs. The collective work of signs elaborated by Roger Bacon represents the most extensive and important during the medieval period. Among the many achievements of R. Bacon, a significant work was a consolidation of prior sign typologies, which contributed to advancing the spoken language. From the mid-13th century onwards, the concept of signs began to invade the faculties of arts. As a consequence, linguistic science began to emerge. Robert Kilwardby, an Archbishop of Canterbury in England and a cardinal, asserted, "Speech is nothing but a sign." Having provided a general overview of semiotics from a historical perspective, I will now seek to introduce two prominent protagonists and their respective models. Saussure and Peirce are arguably two theoreticians of equal importance to the development of modern semiotics. De Saussure, or simply Saussure, was a Swiss linguist and a semiotician earning a doctorate degree from the University of Leipzig in 1876. His dissertation was titled The Use of Genitive Absolute in Sanskrit, an Antique Language. Saussure's model is dyadic, implying the model is comprised of two elements. According to de Saussure, a linguistic sign is not a link between a thing and a name, but between a concept, the signified, and a sound pattern, the signifier. Here, de Saussure clarifies what is intended by the term sound pattern, noting an example will be provided shortly. A sign, according to Saussure, is a dual entity comprised of a sound or a sound pattern that signifies an idea that in turn corresponds to the sound pattern or the signified. A sign must have both a signifier and a signified, as the signifier and the signified are inseparable. The line in the middle serves to distinguish the two elements. For example, the signifier tree conjures an idea or mental concept, signified, that corresponds to the sound pattern tree, as depicted above. Saussure further asserted the sound pattern unique to tree distinguishes the signifier from other related signifiers such as sapling or snag. Charles Sanders Peirce was educated at Harvard, and his training was in chemistry. He was an innovator in mathematics, statistics, philosophy, research methodology, and various sciences. However, Peirce considered himself first and foremost a logician. He made major contributions to logic, but logic for him encompassed much of what today is known as epistemology. In 1959, the British philosopher Bertrand Russell is quoted as saying, "Beyond doubt, Peirce was one of the most original minds of the latter 19th century and certainly the greatest American thinker ever." The Peircean model is based on three elements: the representamen, the interpretant, and an object. Peirce referred to the relationship and interaction between these three elements as semiosis. Additional information pertaining to these three elements will follow momentarily. A primary difference between the Peircean model illustrated here versus Saussure's model is that Peirce did not believe that signification was a straightforward binary relationship between a sign and an object as proposed by Saussure. This disbelief in turn contributed to the development of his triadic model. Peirce viewed his model as how we perceive or understand a sign and its relationship to the object the sign refers to. David Chandler provides an excellent example to describe the Peircean triadic model, utilizing a package with a label and postage as an example. Representamen equates to a package with a label and postage. The interpretant refers to the knowledge of what the box contains, while the object relates to the realization something is inside the box. The representamen, often equated with a thought, thing, or concept, was not intended to be considered as a material object, although the representamen is often interpreted as such. The interpretant does not equate with an interpreter as one might suspect, but rather the sense made of the sign. A sign might reasonably be described as equating to something, for example, an object or an idea, but in an abstract form. However, while the object may be associated with the sign, it, the object, is distinct from the sign. Concisely, Peirce described the object as something beyond the sign to which it refers. The disciplines that use semiotics are numerous. I have included a few below, which include medicine, psychiatry, linguistics, anthropology, philosophy, and communication. In addition to indicating exemplifications of disciplines that employ semiotics, I have also mentioned texts or visual images demonstrating the use of semiotics. Dr. John Nessa is an associate professor within the Department of Global Public Health and Primary Care at the University of Bergen, Norway. I have selected his text titled About Signs and Symptoms. Can semiotics expand the view of clinical medicine? Sven Brinkmann is a professor of general psychology and qualitative methods at the Aalborg University in Denmark. I have selected his text titled Psychiatric Diagnoses as Semiotic Mediators, the Case of ADHD. Professor Barta is considered by some of his peers as a leading semiotician. I have provided an example of Professor Barta's substantive contribution to the science of semiology, namely his text titled Elements of Semiology. Miss Laurent Neva is a designer and anthropologist specializing in design, semiotics, and material culture. Additionally, she has extensive experience in the development of tools for cultural analysis and design innovation by employing anthropological and semiotic thinking. C.W. Morris is a celebrated philosopher, most noted today for his monograph titled Foundations of the Theory of Science, published in 1938. The monograph represented the first volume of the International Encyclopedia of Unified Science. As a business developer and strategist, Ms. Walker asserts online semioticians examine the structure and meaning of online content, seeking to persuade new viewers to glimpse at a web page or website. Professor Ebert's text is a formative example utilizing theoretical semiotics. An example of differing views between two semioticians would encompass the philosophers C.S. Peirce and C.W. Morris. The dominant contrasting elements rest with the underpinning of semiotics as contemplated by each protagonist. Peirce envisaged a semiotic philosophy based on the universal categories of perception, along with the underlying assumption every thought is a sign, while Morris sought to develop a science of signs positioned or aligned within the framework of the science of behavior, encompassing a biological basis. Peirce's model was developed as a science for human beings, whereas Morris' intention to extend semiotics to include sign processing by animals. The manner in which visual media portrays agriculture in the media can influence public perception. Imagination and perception are shaped in part by images seen in the media, which in turn can contribute to stereotypes that are difficult to overcome. According to Hebert, semiotics, among other text and image analysis tools, can contribute to improved evaluation and finer understanding of agricultural communication, permitting the reinforcement of positive images and perceptions. With no claim to completeness, I have carefully selected and included highlights from a fairly wide cross-section of published literature pertaining to semiotics. Against this backdrop, I conclude my podcast. Thank you for watching.